So I didn't know it yet, but this was about to be the worst deadlift I've had in quite some time. Granted, it was still 738 pounds, but probably the worst deadlift I've had in quite some time. So if you're not familiar with me or you're not familiar with the channel, my name's Evan Orlandi. I've been powerlifting now for coming up on 8 years, pulled 700 probably more times than I can count at this point. And today I just kind of want to talk about how this block had some ups and downs and what I did just as a reaction to it, to not let training essentially go to waste and let my mindset kind of ruin how things could have potentially turned out in spite of things initially not looking great. So just like everything else with training, some days are going to be better than others. And even though powerlifting anyway, you're typically functioning based off of the structure, based off of your program, based off of the guidance of your coach, and your coach is operating in, your best interest, things still might not flesh out to be kind of the best possible outcome that both you or your coach kind of anticipated. And so I entered the gym kind of expecting to do what I typically do and aim for the best possible outcome of a 750 pound deadlift. And I ended up falling just a bit short of that. And although, this shortcoming is a pretty small discrepancy when we look at it in terms of maybe a percentage, still the idea of not being able to deliver on kind of the outcome that I went in anticipating definitely left me feeling like I came up a bit short. So in order to kind of like take back the time and energy that was still left over for the rest of training and for the rest of this week, there were kind of like four major things that I focused on, or at least internally, throughout the rest of the week and throughout the rest of the session to make sure that I could still utilize my time as effectively as possible. And we're going to start this off with number one of just figuring out what I can control. I feel as though figuring out what is something that you can actually have an impact on is probably the best place to start, just because that gives you your first kind of point of action. If you sit there and fixate on details that might be completely out of your control, like how you're feeling on the day, even though you took care of all of your recovery variables or hydration, nutrition, whatever it may be, you're kind of stuck. But focusing on what I could control on that specific day anyway looked like just loading a specific number on backdowns. And in a way, also the top set was a form of, figuring out what I could control, just because earlier on in the session, I remember pulling 705 for my last warm up, and I knew it kind of wasn't there on the day. I knew I was not having the best possible training day, and decided to make a decision just based off of that immediate recognition of my current condition. Now, I brought up the backdowns as a form of figuring out what I can control, but that also leads into our second point of maximizing effort where it's possible. Now, when I say maximize effort where possible, I just more so mean as a response to kind of the first point of controllables. So typically with my training, I've got, top set, then a top back down set, then two other sets following that. And the first number is controlled by a cap, which acts as like a ceiling. And our second number is something that doesn't have a cap. It's something that I've got complete control over, and it's up to me to make a good decision. And our third number is something that's completely static and set by my coach. So seizing, the amount of control that I had and what I believed would be possible based on previous training, whether that be this block or the blocks prior, my goal was to go for 606 and load it up, hit it for 5 reps. After that, really rough 738. And that worked out with little issue. It was just challenging because, the rep before was pretty hard. Like that's how training goes. That's how things go. Sometimes you can't fix one thing, but you can try to do another one at least a certain way to where, it kind of makes up for it. And I feel like this is where the fulfillment within the session actually came from, for me anyway. Now, our third point is really just reflection. Like, let's look at what's happened and, try to adjust for the next time around. And this is really all encompassing, whether that be what's happening in the present situation, what happened leading up to this, what could I have done better to get prepared for the worst or the best outcome. And, leading up to this deadlift day, I was really excited. I was like, okay, I'm 650, 750, 408. It's going to be a really cool week. This will be my best training total yet. And I decided to, go out and get baby powder in preparation and go take in extra carbs ahead of time, just so that way, going into the gym, I might be feeling a bit better, but things didn't necessarily go the way I had hoped. Regardless, once I considered the fact that, hitting 650 on squat nearly 48 hours prior, that was pretty challenging. That is that's not like a small task, And so reflecting on that, it's like, okay, I can take that as a win at the very least, and I can move forward based off of that. Maybe not having the absolute best deadlift day at the result of having a fantastic squat day really isn't too bad. I feel that it's really easy to get caught up in seeing what, other people are doing and how other people are progressing. And so if I kind of like start a spiral because someone else's 738 or 750 looked dramatically better than my 738, then, that's probably just going to have a major negative impact on how I see myself within this sport and within things that I'm involved in. And overall just lead to kind of like a reduction in the amount of time that I'm probably willing to dedicate to it. So overall goal, or overall message, I guess, with the fourth point is, don't trip over shit you could step over. It's really not that big of a deal at the end of the day. It is the end of a training block, and, putting energy into it beforehand to make sure that I could have done everything possible is always going to be like the right call in my opinion. But once it's done, it's done. That's it. You kind of got to put things down and walk away after it's met its conclusion, I guess would be the best way to put it. Like, there's no way for me to go back in time and re-have that training session or, like redo that entire block. Like, we're just moving forward, and there's going to be more training days ahead, some where I'm sure I'm much stronger than that. So now I can just look forward to those. So yeah, that was last week. All in all, there were some wins, and there was definitely some L's. Like, I talked about 408 briefly earlier. Didn't end up loading it, cut it at 386. Definitely didn't think it was there, and that kind of sucked. But then I was like, okay, I still have a 5x3 for back down, so let's load up a PR for that. And, we hit it, we kept it rolling, and there was still something productive to take from doing that. So yeah, that's kind of a wrap. The meet that I was planning on doing originally, completely switching topics, but the meet that I was planning on doing that would be about, like, I think 5 weeks out, 6 weeks out from now. Yeah, that got canceled, but I already signed up for Powerlifting America, so I'm kind of cooked. Don't sign up for PLA if you think your meet's gonna get canceled. Just heads up, because Article 14 or whatever the weird ban is if you compete outside of PLA. This is so silly, I swear. But anywho, thanks for watching. Catch y'all whenever I post another video, ?